no suit-wearing businessman like you. You know, I'm just a gangster, I suppose, and I want my corners.
3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Welcome to the Five Corners Podcast. I am Jet Bonifay, and on the other line, he's still thinking about the night Kobe dropped 61 points on the Knicks. It's Ace Merluzza. What's going on, bud?
What's up, man? Thanks for the reminder. The image of Kobe driving baseline and hitting that reverse one-handed slam is still etched in my head.
Yeah,
it
I know.
hurts, man. It hurts.
I know. So, for this inaugural episode, obviously with the tragic death of Kobe and his 13-year-old daughter Gianna, along with the 7 others in that fateful helicopter crash almost 3 weeks ago, we wanted to take this episode and really reflect on Kobe's career, Kobe's post-retirement career as well, and the fact that, he was becoming this, really good basketball mentor dad for his daughter Gianna. So I guess we can start off, how did you hear about it, Ace? I know my reaction was kind of weird, but let me hear how you kind of heard about it, or what was the process for you to kind of find out how it had transpired?
Right. So after the news broke, I was with Charlotte and Jack. Carl's was on call at work, and Charlotte had CCE. So it was an opportunity for us to kind of enjoy the day, but it didn't start off with a plan to enjoy it. So we initially thought that we would just drop off Charlotte, pick her up, and then the plan was to just go back home and chill out, maybe go to the gym. I would just drop them off at the kids club. I'd get my workout. So when the news broke, well, I'll fast forward like maybe a few hours after I learned about it. I saw the timeline of the accident in the news. Kobe and the 7 others got in the helicopter in and around the time that I picked up Charlotte at 11 Central, right? So the time the chopper reportedly crashed was around the time we returned home to discover that we were locked out, because I usually enter from the garage and I didn't have the other key. So we pivoted and went to the park. The day was nice enough and it gave us an opportunity for me to just enjoy time with the kids. And we very seldom go to the park, so this is as good an opportunity as any. So after the park, I took the kids out for lunch, and once we got our food, my phone blew up. And immediately I thought of the previous night. I was watching the Jalen Kobe skit where Kobe asked for 81 olives, and I never not watched that like more than once. I had to watch it multiple times, and I laughed the same way each time. And the morning after, someone shared a meme in one of my active IG conversations of the video of Kobe breaking down the game with Gianna at that game in Brooklyn, with a caption that read, "I would have scored 40,000 if I was in the East," right? And it's definitely true. You totally would have scored 40,000. And I remember just commenting, yeah, I believe he would have done so. Along with Kobe's last tweet to LeBron congratulating him on passing him on the scoring list, that was the morning. And, couple that with the night before. I mean, Kobe was on my mind from the previous night onward, and it just blows my mind that in his final hour of life, and without my knowing what his fate would be, I kind of came to a realization that time is so precious when it comes to how much you spend it with your kids. And I was set on getting holed up, business as usual, lazy Sunday, possibly going to the gym, but I wouldn't be interacting with Charlotte and Jack, right? So circumstances as they were in that moment, which simultaneously coincided with Kobe passing, had me making a better choice for the sake of truly enjoying time and seizing an opportunity with the kids. So in some weird cosmic way, I feel that I was supposed to work out in that way. Not so much Kobe passing, but my appreciating being with my kids more, with how limited our time is just to be with them.
Yeah, I think for me it was almost kind of the same story, right? It was kind of this weird irony that was at play, because my brother had driven up from from Philly where he lives to go bridal wedding dress shopping with his fiance. So, the whole family kind of went out to New York City, and we were in a rush to get back to Jersey because Jason, my son had a AAU basketball game. So, I took Jeremy with me, my brother, and we kind of drove out of the city, I should say, and back to Jersey to make sure he made his AAU game. So we got there, and my kid's game was going to start in about 15 minutes. And so I'm getting him ready, and my brother comes over to me, and he's like, "Hey, take a look at this." And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "There's reports coming on the phone through Twitter that Kobe's helicopter crashed." And, as typical for this day and age, you're immediately like, "Oh, dude, that's a friggin' hoax," right? Like that. There's no way that that's real. Somebody's going to come out. Yeah, exactly. Alternative facts, right? Fake news. And of course, it was like TMZ. So that really made it like, oh, there's no way that's real, right? Because if it wasn't, if it was not a legit news outlet, we were not believing it. Because again, we've been through that so many times with so many different personalities and celebrities that it just happens so often that you don't take that at face value.
Right.
So it's funny because my brother is continually refreshing his phone, and as the minutes go by, more and more news outlets, and again, still not like super reputable ones, right? And we're like, nah, it can't be real. Unless ESPN or Woj puts it out, it's not real. My son had just started the game, and my brother comes over to me. He's like, no, it's real. Here's the Atlantic, here's Bleacher Report, here's finally like that last shoe drop. It was ESPN. And I'm just like, wow.
Your heart just sank, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like you had mentioned, it was one of those things. It's like I was doing what Kobe, in essence, was doing, right? Which was taking his kid to a basketball game as part of their normal weekend routine. And that was generally our routine on the weekends, my kid's routine. It's either I'm taking him to, me and him working out, or me and him going to a game. So just to hear, and in the beginning, we didn't know his daughter was in the airplane, right, or the helicopter. So we had thought that it was just Kobe, and then news kind of started trickling in that his daughter was also with him because he was going to her AAU basketball game. So, to the point I think you were making about some weird cosmic message, at least for me, it was this exact same thing. It was like, yeah, we were doing what Kobe had been doing. And again, it's funny how kind of basketball transcends lines of like financial strata, right? It's like, yeah, Kobe's a multi-millionaire flying in a helicopter, but ultimately he was bringing his daughter to a basketball game, which is kind of transcendent across the United States, across the globe. People are doing that every week, every weekend to their kids too. So, I think my heart sinking was, and again, because of the fact that he was on our minds, right? He had just, like you had mentioned, he had just congratulated LeBron on surpassing him in the scoring titles. It was almost surreal to kind of think about. And I was kind of in a weird daze. I don't think I felt that way since probably Magic Johnson came out and said that like he had HIV. Because, remember back in those days, that was like a death sentence, right? So that was kind of the I obviously don't want to make the analogy to like September 11th, but I think the Magic Johnson comp is probably as close, for me at least, so.
Right. Michael Jackson comes close. I mean, he's not an athlete.
Good point.
But,
yeah.
You're talking about a guy who is considered one of the best at what he does.
Right.
Who clearly had more ahead of him, and his life was cut short. So, yeah, like your brother was doing. I just kept on thumbing
refreshing
down my phone, refreshing Twitter, and I refused to believe it. And then, like the everything that came beforehand, like what I did, I essentially retraced my steps and reflected on what I was doing during his final hours of life.
Right.
He was on our mind.
Yep.
And I was doing stuff that he in essence was doing too.
Right. I think that's why it hit us particularly hard, because like you said, we were doing something that was analogous to what he was doing with his kid at that exact moment. And to think about like just the sheer horror of that moment, and you're just doing some mundane thing on the weekend with especially your children, right? I mean, it's a tragedy enough that he lost his life, but the daughter and obviously the teammates, right? Which is also another tragic thing. The fact that the teammates were on the helicopter and their parents were on the helicopter as well, I think was even more tragic than just having, Kobe lose his life. So, so what was your first, with all that said, what was your first experience with Kobe as a basketball fan?
Well, Kobe was this phenom, who asked Brandy to his prom.
I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, we were sophomores in high school.
16, right? Yeah.
Before they all got drafted. So, in a lot of ways, he was like our peer,
right?
But beyond that, he was just this prospect who was projected to go to the Knicks or Nets. I mean, no one knew how good he would become, but I'll admit I was intrigued. But I didn't think we needed to draft a guard as the Knicks were coming into cap space.
Oh boy,
to kind of reload.
Oh boy.
So I thought we'd just be able to sign someone outright.
Sure.
It was a pipe dream. Reggie Miller comes to mind. I guess Mitch Richmond was available, and these were top shooting guards. But ultimately, we signed Allen Houston to a $56 million deal, and he was an up and coming guard, not a superstar, but he was our guard that summer. But I got to tell you, not a day goes by where I think, what if?
Right. You regretted that decision.
Yeah. Because I remember cutting the newspaper article, the Bergen Record, and I kept it up until like my folks sold the house, and I kind of wish I took it with me so I could like frame it, because that was like the first newspaper article that I saw Kobe's face on it.
Sure.
And he was discussed within the Knicks context for the last time.
Right.
And you obviously know what happened after. Got drafted by Charlotte, got traded to the Lakers for Vlade Divac, and he went on to become one of the best shooting guards. So that's my first experience.
Yeah, I think for me, I wasn't really paying attention to him that much because, and this, right? I was self-styling myself to be a point guard. So back in those days, it was AI for me, right? I was watching Georgetown games. He was rocking Jordan, AI was rocking Jordan 11s. Those Georgetown uniforms were just super hot fire, right? I mean, it was fire. Those jerseys were amazing. So he was my guy. And for the longest time, I was an MJ guy. So, Kobe coming out was kind of an afterthought for me. So I wasn't really thinking about Kobe. I think the first thing that I heard about the Lakers was Shaq, right? It was like, oh, Shaq is going to get, traded from the Magic to the Lakers. And, I didn't think that, Kobe was going to be an integral piece yet because we hadn't seen enough about him. Like you said, he was an unknown commodity at that time, and people were kind of overlooking him for more, more featured veterans or guys on the come up like Allen Houston. I think the first time that I really started paying attention, and I remember this because you and I were watching these games, was that 99-2000 season, right? When they were just steamrolling the league. Remember they had like a 19-game win streak. They had like another 13-game win streak. And it was like Shaq at the peak of his powers. And it was like Kobe finally finding himself as like this, Robin to Shaq's gargantuan like Batman, right? And it was just fucking bananas. Right. But I still hated them. And it was because I love the Kings, right? I don't love the Kings, but I loved watching the Kings. It was like that Jason Williams time with like Chris Webber. Peja was on that team. So it was great to watch. And the Lakers were just this juggernaut. So you had to root against them because they were basically like the Yankees, right? Like everybody hates the Yankees because they're winners. You and I were on the phone together, and we were watching that Blazers series, right?
Yeah.
And it came to a seventh and deciding game. So you and I were both on the phone with each other. And we were cackling the whole way because we hated the Lakers, right? We were just like, oh, yeah, fuck these guys, right? Yeah. And they were down by 20 points walking into that fourth quarter, and we were like, oh, they're going down. That's it. Shaq's out.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really a lot of fun watching that game until Well, you know what happened.
It was so funny because we're sitting there on the phone and we're cackling, and they're continually whittling down this lead, right? And it's just like
Yeah.
20, 15, 12, 10. And then finally he made that drive, and again, it was not quintessential Kobe, because the Kobe we knew was like, it was a guy who's taking a forced shot against 4 defenders. In this scenario, he drew 3 or 4 guys and threw that lob to Shaq for that decisive dunk. And it literally stole the Blazers' soul. I mean, you could see it on Scottie Pippen. Everybody on that team was just like, that's it. It was done. And you and I kind of deflated at the exact same time that that alley-oop went through the hoop.
We started talking less and less and less in the course of 5 minutes.
It got quieter and quieter on the phone, man.
Until finally we were just like,
God damn it. Right.
I'll see you Monday.
Right. We just hung up the phone, like dejected.
Yeah. We're like,
it's like, all right, man. I'll
guess
talk to you in class, right?
But back to when Kobe was coming out of the draft, I mean, there were other guards that were clearly more established.
Absolutely.
And made a name for themselves.
Yeah, man.
In college. You're talking Ray Allen.
Yeah, Sharif, right?
Kerry Kittles.
Kerry Kittles, no doubt. Yeah.
So definitely. You knew a lot more about those guys, right? Because, they had done well in college. So
and this was, right now, high school basketball has become its own cottage industry, right?
Yeah.
It's been rife for they're putting ESPN games of these high schools, right?
Sierra Canyon.
Absolutely, right? So that didn't occur back in those days. So you only knew about Kobe if you were a hardcore basketball guy, deep into basketball. And at that point, we were not that deep. I mean, we loved our teams, we loved watching people play, but you had to have been digging into the draft in order to realize, oh, there's this guy coming from Lower Merion that's going to come out of high school, and it just hadn't happened that often, right? So
a guard,
right? Exactly, not a Kevin Garnett, right, or whatever.
Yeah,
so
it's usually a big coming out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was, for us, he was not on the forefront for us because, like you said, he wasn't established. The college game was still the way to kind of find your draft picks through the lottery, and those are the people that we knew. Those are the people that we watched. During the college basketball, either the NCAA tournament or throughout the college season. So,
right.
What do you think about his legacy, though? Now that he's obviously passed on, where do you think he sits in the pantheon of, the basketball demigods?
Well, I first want to preface my response to that with the fact that I kind of feel early on in his career he had a different persona, which made him a lot less likable.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like as he progressed and matured, he became more and more likable.
Right.
And I kind of feel he hit at the peak of likability when he had Pau Gasol and he won those 2 championships with them.
Sure.
And then the whole Mamba mentality thing started coming out.
Right.
But you're still going to have a small group that hates him no matter what, LeBron James stands come to mind, but that's neither here nor there. And plus, he played 20 seasons for one team. Right. That's very rare.
Absolutely.
So as far as his legacy, I kind of feel he cemented his place as a legend, an all-time great, posthumously.
Right.
And there's a generation of athletes that have adopted his Mamba mentality.
Right.
And they constantly reference it. And while most during the 80s and early 90s emulated MJ for his attacking nature, his physical game on the court, I kind of feel Kobe introduced players to the cerebral part of the game. And I think that more than anything is the legacy he leaves behind.
I think
there's just so much more to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me though, he was kind of I think in the beginning of his career and towards when they were making those runs, I think he was kind of like the last bastion of that, old school 90s hero ball that we were. And again,
right.
I love Michael Jordan and obviously Kobe was a disciple of Mike, right, of MJ. and he fashioned all of his moves to look exactly like Michael Jordan, right? So you could see it in his footwork, you could see it in his body movements, but it was really kind of antithetical to where the game was going to go, right? He was kind of, and the reason why I disliked him from a basketball playing standpoint was because he was the guy who just he was a ball stopper, right? We would call him a ball stopping guard, kind of a James Harden type now, right? Carmelo in some sense, right? The ball would end up in his hands and he would hold it for 18 seconds of the shot clock and ultimately take that shot. So I think for me, it was a tough brand of basketball to watch. And it's weird because, like I said, I loved MJ, and maybe it's just because he wasn't Michael Jordan that I was just like, oh God, I can't believe this guy's holding the rock for 15 seconds before he chucks up a shot. And I think to the point you're making, I think when that whole thing with Shaq transpired, it definitely made him even more dislikable because you were like, why would this guy not just keep this dude on his team? And this was again before the player empowerment days of today, right? Because now you see it all the time. Guys are looking to leave. They're trying to make hay on their own, and I think that's what Kobe was trying to do. He didn't want to be under the shadow of Shaq, but we didn't understand that back in those days. We were just like, well, here's a guy they just reeled off 3. They could probably win another 3 or 4 if they just stayed together, and he didn't want that because I think, like you said, that Mamba mentality did not permeate to Shaq. Shaq was like, dude, I'm the biggest dude around. I don't need to practice like a crazy fiend like you do. And I think that's the problem, right? And this is why the reason why everybody hated Michael Jordan as a teammate. He was so intense in every aspect of the game. And I think as I got older, I liked that about him even more. The fact that no matter what he was doing, whether it was preparation or the game, he was doing it like 1,000%, almost to the detriment of his own team. So I think for me, because of that, because of the work ethic that he brought to the table, I think you got to put him squarely as, number 3, number 4 shooting guard ever, right? And again, he was people forget he was an offensive powerhouse, but he was also a defensive stopper for a long, long time. Yeah, I think for me that's what sticks out to me the most is that he was a two-way guy that wanted to prove that he could carry a team by himself to the promised land without having another superstar in his back pocket, which again, like we said, is very different from today where guys are trying to team up and become super teams.
Right. And I find it fascinating that, when he passed and everyone had their own time to reflect on TV, and you're hearing about stories that you've never heard before. Jerry West comes to mind.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to find out that Kobe was close to leaving on multiple occasions. Things we haven't even heard of. Like everyone knows about the rumored like trade demands possibly going to the Bulls, but I didn't hear about him like thinking about seriously considering going to the Clippers, as Jerry West said, and Jerry West imploring Kobe not to play for the team and that owner. And we all know who he was referring to.
Right.
And I think Woj even put out a report where I forget which stage Kobe was in his Lakers career, but I think it had something to do with rumor that he planned on wanting to buy out Kobe. And Kobe said, well, I'll just go to New York and play for Phil.
Right.
It was fascinating to find out all these like tidbits of information that no one knew about until he passed away. So,
but it goes back to what you were saying before too, like how rare it is for a player to stay with one team for 2 decades.
Yeah.
Right. For all of the kismet and all the luck things that had to fall into place for that to actually even happen. And let's be honest, the last couple of years, he was not productive, and the Lakers made a concerted effort, almost mortgaging their future, right? Mm-hmm. And committing to Kobe, knowing that he was no longer as efficient. And, they did right by him. Yeah. And again, it's probably a testament to the owners and the relationship that Jerry West and the Busses had with Kobe. But yeah, I think those 2 or 3 years when they stunk was because they devoted all that cap room to Kobe Bryant in, a depleted state when they could have easily shipped him off and started rebuilding for the future. So, and I think that's because he was such a part of Los Angeles as a fixture. It was funny. Somebody was saying, I forgot who it was. It was one of the podcasts. Like, he really engaged with the Latino community in LA. And I think because there's such a large population of Latinos that he became a real fixture for that community too. You know, obviously his wife, I think, is part Mexican.
I think she's Venezuelan.
Okay,
I could be wrong,
so she's Latino of some sort, and obviously he spoke Spanish, you know, pretty fluently. So he was on like, you know, local broadcasts talking Spanish. So I think they gravitated to Kobe because they felt like he was amongst them in the community. So that might have been part of it too, because obviously it brings more people to the Staples Arena. But yeah, I think he ingratiated with himself to LA. He was a quintessential, you know, next to Magic. You're just like, yeah, it's Magic and Kobe that are kind of, again, quintessential, you know, Los Angeles players. There's not many other people that you think about and you associate specifically to LA. And I think Kobe is one of those guys.
Yeah. Then you're right. I mean, the Lakers did take a huge step back and giving him a huge, and I'll call it a legacy contract.
Right.
Because aside from their draft picks that were coming on board, they really had no room to sign any impact players.
Yep.
And, you know, his Achilles blew up and it was pretty much hanging on a thread the last few years, but he was still able to give you buckets at any given time.
Right.
But it's still a remarkable career, regardless of how it ended.
And I think the next iteration of his career post basketball, I think is really where I started to really respect him more. Right. Again, you know, all you ever saw was kind of the media portrayals of what he did with Shaq. He kind of, you know, he was problematic. He's tough on his teammates. So you had this picture, and then you start to get these, you know, he started a production company. He was involved with Major League Soccer. He was deeply involved with WNBA and helping the WNBA players get the rightful salaries. So I think all of that kind of in confluence. And then you start hearing about, you know, and again, I don't know if I think I might have told you, but, you know, I watch now because Jason is starting basketball. I watch a lot of these YouTube videos of these, you know, grammar schools and high schools that are high profile that get, you know, videos put on about them. And Gianna was one of those. And I was like, wow, she moves like Kobe, right? Her movement patterns, her footwork. You could tell Kobe was taking a really deep interest, obviously because Gianna had taken a deep interest in basketball, but he was really taking a deep interest in mentoring her to become like him. I mean, I don't know how else to kind of put it, but, you know, again, I forgot who it was. It may have been Tracy McGrady, who they were interviewing after he passed away. And he was saying that when he was, you know, his daughter is also part of that AAU team, or one of the AAU teams in that circuit. And he was saying when he's watching in the stands, he's like, yeah, she moves just like Kobe does. And I think that's exactly, you know, what Kobe's, you know, goal was and mindset was when it came to that.
He talked about a 6-phase training plan for Gianna, and they're only up to stage 2. And she was clearly on her way to becoming a great hooper. And for me, that's the most tragic aspect to all of this. Kobe had his 20 years. He made his mark on the game. Gigi, we'll never know what she would eventually become. You know, and for me, that stings. You know, being a dad myself to a young lady, you know, kind of strikes a chord in me as well. So, but, and I told you before off air that I really believe, maybe not the oldest because she's kind of all in on volleyball, but Bianca Capri, I wouldn't be surprised if one of them like comes out of nowhere and like makes an impact and starts playing basketball, because you know they have a support system behind them that'll be with them every step of the way going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned that about, you know, kind of the two daughters, but, you know, even Gianna, you know, people were saying like, oh, you know, Kobe, are you guys going to try, you and Vanessa are going to try for a son, you know, to kind of carry on this basketball legacy. And Gianna was like, no, that's my job, right? And I think that's what I love about, you know, that, you know, again, the transcendence of that Mamba mentality. She was like, no, you don't need a boy. I'm right here. And I think to the point you're making, I think I got this. Right. Exactly. I think that was verbatim what they were kind of saying about, you know, her response to that. Right. But yeah, I think that the two daughters, because somebody's going to take up that mantle. And I think, you know, again, to your point, is they're going to run with it, and using that support group around them, they'll be able to do some good things. And again, like you mentioned, I think that's probably one of the more tragic things is that, its potential, it's untapped, and you'll never be able to see where it would have potentially gone. I mean, obviously, she was already at the very highest levels for her age range. And I think it would have been a shoe-in. I think she wanted to go to UConn, right? So I think, all of the development before then and then going there and getting trained by that UConn staff, certainly she would have been one of the great, female basketball players that we've had in some time. So that's that's the shame of this whole tragedy.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like the last few months of Kobe's life, like it was of him with Mamacita Gigi,
Right.
like attached to him. I think everyone was like watching closely. It was always on the news. Whenever he'd go on the interview circuit, she was always a topic of discussion. So we were bearing witness to something special. I mean, starting with that footage of them at the Brooklyn Nets game.
Right.
And yeah, I really just can't get over it. It's it'll take a while. I think we're slowly moving along towards healing. But yeah, we lost a good one.
Yeah, and I think in that same podcast, right? Kobe had mentioned that he had stopped watching basketball, right? He was so engaged in kind of everything else that he was working on, post retirement, that he really wasn't into it. It was really Gianna that drew him back into the game, because she was asking all kinds of questions. And it's funny, like you mentioned about being a dad, my kid is exactly the same way, right? He's watching these games. He wants to understand, why are people moving here? Why is this guy doing this? And that's what Kobe had mentioned. He's like, look, the only reason why I got back into watching it was because Gianna's asking me about this player, that player, this player, what do I do here? What do I do here? And it kind of drew him back in and made him kind of re-engage with the basketball community, which is kind of strange to hear from Kobe, is that, this guy who was so deeply into basketball and so committed to the craft had been disengaged after retirement, and that his daughter was kind of bringing him back into the fold. Again, it goes back to, talking about the sadness of it all. Is just like, yeah, it's these two people, and then basketball was the conduit in their relationship. And like I said, it draws parallels, to me as a dad, and that's the relationship that I foster too with my son, and I think that's why it hurts, right? Because it's that you lose that relationship that would have generated some really, really great things on the basketball court and off the basketball court. So it's a shame.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, and on a basketball level, on a purely basketball level, I really enjoyed watching Gigi and her team. And I don't know if you noticed, but she was playing with Zach Randolph's daughter.
Yeah, I did see that.
And she plays just like her dad. Like, she's grabbing boards, offensive rebounds, putbacks. I think I saw one clip of her like bodying a defender with an up and under, and I'm like, of course you're Zach Randolph's daughter.
Right.
But
it's funny,
it's
right?
Amazing.
But it's funny though, because that's what you transfer to your kids, right? All the movement patterns that these guys are pros, so they've done it, hundreds of thousands of times. That's what you're good at teaching, right? You're good at teaching what you were doing. And, like you said, it starts to mimic the person that was teaching it. And it's funny, and somebody else, again, maybe it was Tracy McGrady again in that same interview, even physically, she kind of mimicked Kobe's physical body type, right? That kind of long, lanky, frame that was kind of lithe, and the movement pattern again was kind of Mamba snaky-esque. Even her drives to the basket were kind of the same movement, where she's sliding and gliding, away from defenders. So it was cool to see. So.
Yeah, Vanessa even nicknamed her wings. Aside from Mamacita, she also called her wings.
Yeah, big wingspan.
All limbs.
Right,
but
all limbs.
Yeah, I can't say enough how much I enjoyed watching footage of Gigi with an entry pass to McKinley Randolph, dribbling, backing her defender down 2-3 times, faking a pass and then ultimately dumping it off to like a cutting Gianna baseline. I'm like, I'm watching Kobe's daughter and Zebo's daughter hoop and absolutely kill it.
Right.
And I enjoyed every moment. I'd catch a clip on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
I really did.
And I think that's the fun part about watching kind of youth basketball, right? There's no agenda, there's no ulterior motive. It's just, you know, love of the game.
Yep.
These kids want to hoop. That's all they want to do all day long. They want to consume basketball. They eat, sleep, and breathe it. So it's the purest form of basketball, in my opinion. That's why I love watching these games. So, so again, I think, you know, to kind of close off the topic, I think it's tragic, but I think ultimately the lesson it taught, you know, me and I think us is just the fleeting nature of life, right? Like, you know, you're not sheltered from tragedy. And I think you need to try every moment in your life to tell the people that you love them, because, you know, and I put this on one of my quotes is that, you know, tomorrow is not promised, right? You're not promised a tomorrow. You can't live for tomorrow. You got to live for today. So I think for me, his passing, his daughter's passing, those 7 other poor souls, I think the lesson that it kind of taught everybody is that, you know, you have to take advantage of today, because tomorrow's not promised. So with that, we're going to close out this episode. Again, thank you for listening and watching. We're glad you took time out of your day to listen to us. We hope to see you next time. Until then, we out.